Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is David Hazan, coming out of MadCave Studio. We're here to talk about his new project, Kosher Mafia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, has comic books always been kind of the passion growing up, and like this was kind of the career you want to go down, or was there kind of something that led you to this?
No, I always wanted to write. Comics were not a huge part of my life until sort of maybe 6, 7 years ago. I didn't grow up reading comics, but I always loved comics related media. And it wasn't until some colleagues of mine decided to stop putting up with me talking about it without having read the source material that they shoved some books in my hands, and next minute I was hooked. And I kind of have an obsessive personality, so once I like something, I like to know how it works. And about 5 minutes later, I was writing comics, and entered MadCave's talent search 1, and here I am.
So then, like kind of short story format, or like kind of more long novels was kind of where you started.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of I have a degree in writing, and there's a whole bunch of half-finished novels that's sitting somewhere that will never see the light of day. But yeah, I've always been writing, but I guess comics kind of made sense to me in a way that prose never did. Just in terms of my brain coping with the amount of material that I needed to write. And yeah, it just all fell into place. I don't know how else to describe it, but it felt like home in a way that nothing else did in terms of writing. So
no, I think a lot of us kind of share that same story where you kind of find that one comic book that resonates with you, and it's just like, man, this is a really good story. And you're like, oh man, I could do something like this, or I would like to do something like this. And I think that sends a lot of people down that path.
Absolutely. For me, it was Batwoman Elegy.
Okay.
That Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams, it's just fantastic. It's just magic. Like it lit kind of up a part of my brain that was just like, oh, this is great.
Yes.
And of course, it's like two titans of the industry as well, probably doing some of their best work. So it made sense.
Yeah. That would definitely be an inspiring start. Now, what's really interesting is obviously we have the book we're here to discuss today, Kosher Mafia, and then Nottingham, which I've read the first issue of. Now, what's interesting to me is that Nottingham is obviously based off the Robin Hood kind of series that we all know. And then Kosher Mafia, obviously, as we'll get into later, has a lot of historical pinpoints. Do you find yourself drawing from like classic literature and history more often in your writing, or was this kind of two stories that you just kind of fell in love with?
I think writing from history is much easier, in the sense that the ideas kind of leap out to me in a way that like otherwise you have to sort of pull it all together yourself. But it's almost very similar to writing like from an established canon, say for example superheroes, right? Where the audience gets more validated the more you pull from the history, but the more you dance between the raindrops of the established canon, kind of.
Yeah.
In that all of my ideas for Nottingham come from the big historical events of that period. Um, but then once I have the ideas, I sort of try to twist them in my own way, and really kind of that's where the creativity comes from. And you're just sort of trying to find new things in it while also validating people who know what actually went on during the time period. Um, so and that's the fun of all historical fiction, I think. So it's not so divorced from writing superheroes, really,
Yeah.
because it's the same kind of balance.
No, definitely. I would agree with that. And it's nice too because you take a historical event, they pretty much laid the foundation for you, and you pretty much then have permission to take that foundation and kind of run off the rails with it, which is nice.
Absolutely.
Um, now, for this, obviously, this would be, what is it? Nottingham has, is it 6 or 7 issues?
Nottingham, as of today, Nottingham 13 comes out next
Okay.
week. So
Yeah. And then we have this. So you have quite a bit of experience now, kind of under your belt for writing comics. Has it gotten easier? Kind of just starting out and then kind of leaping into this?
bits of it have gotten easier in that, like, I I definitely feel more confident as a writer. But bits of it have also gotten harder because your standards for yourself just
Yeah.
keep climbing. Um, and you never want to disappoint yourself first, because you're the person who ends up, being the audience until such time as it gets released to the public, and that can be, a year or two. I finished writing Kosher Mafia last year. It's only coming out now, so it, making comics can be a long process,
Yeah.
and like, um, you just don't want to let yourself down either. um, but yeah, I've been doing this for 5 years now, and it's kind of been sort of the joy of 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 my creative existence, getting to do this. So I couldn't be happier making comics, and I don't know how to stop either. So
Perfect. There's a lot of history, in my opinion, that needs to be converted into comics. And I think you definitely have quite a bit of stories to tell. So we'll be waiting for that. Now, what was it like switching from novel writing to comics and knowing that you're essentially writing a story for someone to then translate into art with your story to make it a complete kind of book itself?
I think it's very freeing. Um, it's a learning curve trying to understand that, like, when you're writing for an artist, you're writing for them and not necessarily directly for the reader. So I think the sort of first few issues of Nottingham was trying to get my head around, actually, um, most of what I write on this page will never see will never hit the reader directly. Um, but also, like, I thrive with dialogue. It's my favorite part of doing the job. Is stupid, messy people talking to each other. Um, and I try to make sure that the scripts allow my artists to, for the most part, do the things that they love about the job the most. Um, so I'm always asking artists, what do you love to draw? What do you not like to draw? Before we sort of dive into the whole thing. Sometimes it's hard to cater to that. Sometimes it's easier.
Yeah.
So, for example, Shane says to me, Shane Connery Volk, the artist of Nottingham, he says to me, I really would love to draw an issue that's set in the snow. So I wrote one, and then sort of scheduling issues made it that Shane couldn't draw it, and so we ended up getting Andrea Moody on the Free Comic Book Day issue of Nottingham. And so I had to write another story. It was only a 10-pager that we put in MadCave's Tales from the Cave, that was set in the snow, so that Shane, by the end of this, could have at least done one story set in the snow.
He's still
But we
waiting
got
for a
it
snow
done.
story.
And it's just about getting the joy, right?
Yeah.
When people are enjoying what they're doing, it really reflects on the page, and that's what I want to do for my artists, because they're spending infinitely more time hacking away at this than I ever will. So yeah, I just want to make sure they're having fun doing it.
Yeah, the last thing you want is your artist to get mad mid drawing and start inserting little digs through the story. Don't ever
Listen,
make
they
me think
can
of plague.
they can say whatever they want about me. I don't mind. They do great art. They can do whatever they want.
As long as they have fun doing it.
Exactly.
Perfect. Now, being a new artist and kind of making these stories and kind of having them out, what was it like kind of jumping into this and then seeing an issue like in physical print? Like, you
I
went
mean,
into comics and there it is.
it was a crazy ride. I'm not gonna lie. So, Nottingham, I wrote sort of towards the end of 2019 and finished just before the pandemic hit. And it was like a year before the first issue came out. So I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs, seeing what's going on in the world, seeing what's going on in the industry. As we had this sort of pencils down moment. We never had that pencils down moment, thankfully. Shane was drawing right through. And then issue 1 came out in March of 2021. And it sold out day one. And then another printing, and then another printing, and then another printing. I think, I have had an experience that very few people in comics have had, and I'm very thankful for that. And it was such a, wildly gratifying experience. But my one note I would have to say is it would be nice if people didn't scalp things and instead bought them to read them, because
Yeah.
ultimately that's what the goal is for me. I want people to read stuff, and I want whoever wants to read it to be able to get it, instead of people sort of financially speculating on my books, which will forever be weird to me. Not knocking it. If you want to buy whatever, that's fine. But my primary perspective is for people to read things, not for people to seal them away in plastic and never look at them again.
And it's so funny you say that, because it was at our convention here, in Illinois for Chicago. And I was talking to Patrick Horvath, who did Beneath the Trees. And I said, how weird is it to know that like your first issue of that is being sold graded for $2,000? And some of those people have never read it. It's a book that will never even see light of day. And he's like, it breaks my heart to know that I drew this whole book and wrote it, and that book that someone wants will never even see fingers.
Yeah. And I mean, I will acknowledge that those people are as much part of the consuming audience as everybody else, but it's not why I do it,
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder, like when you buy, like, didn't you at least want to crack open the cover just like a little bit, just to see? That would kill me to just send something off right away and never see the pages.
Yeah, I mean, all of my work is on the inside, so.
So how did you get started with MadCave?
I entered the talent search, the MadCave's annual talent search. I entered the second one. They just announced a few weeks ago the 7th annual talent search, but I was in the second one. I almost missed the submission deadline because I was sitting on my story that I wanted to refine, and then woke up in the middle of the night one night, realized that I had forgotten to send it, and hurriedly sent it in just before the deadline. And I won, and that's how Nottingham came about.
That's awesome. And obviously, I mean, it speaks to the story. I mean, here you are just kind of hurriedly sending off the story like, oh man, I hope something happens with it. They're like, yeah, you won. And now was that like you won an exclusive contract for like 1 year, or was that like a kind of
It
like
was
putting you
a
on staff?
it was a contract for one series, uh, of one 5-issue series, which was Nottingham Volume 1. Yeah.
And then they saw all the reprints and they said, all right, I think we're gonna
I think
continue
we're
this
gonna do
story.
more. I think we're gonna do more, is what they said.
Um, Now being kind of new to the comic book series, and again probably being more used to writing kind of a longer story, do you see things like Nottingham, or as we get into Kosher Mafia, something that you have like an intended end for, or is it harder to kind of do like these mini series because you could keep going almost, I wouldn't say indefinitely, but longer?
I think I think in 5-issue lots, like, actually my brain's very suited to that, as it turns out. So yeah, look, I have no trouble with, thinking that in that miniseries format. I did have Nottingham's ending in mind like 3 issues in. uh, and sort of, we're talking about the full 15-issue arc, that is coming to a close in the next couple of months. And I had that in my head since the end of 2019. I kind of knew what I was going to do with that. So, um, but yeah, endings are hard to write, as it turns
Yeah,
out. Even if you've had the ending in your head for 5 years almost, it's hard to get it on the page. But yeah, um, I think my brain is sort of just geared towards those smaller chunks of storytelling.
yeah,
And I find it much easier than writing prose, actually.
awesome. Yeah, I mean, then again, obviously the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you have a pretty long series. Obviously, we got Nottingham that's coming up, and then you have another one starting now, um, which again we'll get into here in a little bit. Before we get into that last question, um, for everyone listening, if you had, being a newer writer, if you had one thing that you would say maybe learn faster or look up quicker that will accelerate kind of your writing or getting into this business, is there something you think new writers or trying to get into the comic book writing world should focus on a little bit more than what just the basics?
I mean, it's all basics, I guess, in a sense. But I think one of the big things to learn, and this is a very much a do as I say and not as I do, because Nottingham was really my first real series, and it, you know, but not everything you write has to get published. You can write things that just for you, that are just to improve your craft. Um, and also ask your artist what they want to draw. I think that's the other thing, is that, like, you are not the star of the show. You work in a collaborative medium, and if you want to make comics, do it to make comics, and that involves an artist, hopefully, who is having a good time drawing what they're drawing.
Definitely. No, communication is key. Very few people can do the whole thing from start to finish. Nor would you want, I would assume, even from your standpoint, if or you do like drawing, you wouldn't want to write, draw it, edit it, letter
I
it,
can't.
color it.
I can't draw. I wish I could. But I can't. And you know what? I think that's somebody else's game. Even if I, had the sort of an expansive time to learn to draw, I don't know that I would love it, like doing it as part of the job. So I'm more than happy to let somebody else do that part of it.
Perfect. Which obviously brings us into the whole reason we're here. So Kosher Mafia, brand
Mhm.
new series coming out. Where did this story come from? Was this something you had in the back of your mind, or kind of came to you recently?
No, this one it came to me in 2021. I had just reread The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, and really was interested in writing a story that was quintessentially a Jewish story, um, and that leaned on that part of my heritage. Um, and I was like, well, what if I did this sort of crime story that was set in the place that our modern comic book industry was born, which is Cleveland, Ohio, in the 30s. So in the place and time. And so I was heavily inspired by Cavalier and Clay. And then um, I did a bit of research into what was going on with Jewish organized crime in Cleveland, and landed on like what was going on with the sort of American domestic Nazi organizations at the time, or proto-Nazi organizations, uh, like for example the German American Bund, who definitely one of the villains of this story, um, and just the wealth of information as a result of sort of Cleveland being, or sort of Middle America generally being, a hub of German immigration, um, and it all kind of sort of unraveled from there into a story, and yeah, it's just so, the story is both so deeply personal in a weird way, and it just worked. I think with some of this historical fiction, sometimes you just land on something, and the more you read about the history, the more it just works. And the more the idea works for you, and therefore it kind of sings on the page, and all of a sudden you're making a book.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's one of the best things about this comic book is I love history. I love the little bits that everyone forgets. When I was telling people, I'm like, oh, I got an interview today. I can't wait for this comic book to get out. And I say, oh, it's Kosher Mafia. They're like, what do you mean Jewish organized crime? That's not a thing. I said, yes, yes,
Yeah.
it is.
You know that place called Las Vegas? That would not exist without Jewish organized crime.
Yeah. And I mean, look at it today. And it's great that these happen, because I think this book will provide a lot of insight for people that don't know about that part of history. Because when you look at like TV shows like The Watchmen on HBO, and how many people learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre from that show, which is such a key historical fact that was pretty much lost for quite some time until Oklahoma actually admitted to it and finally put it in history books. I think we kind of have the same thing with your book. I think a lot of people are going to be entertained from a fictional standpoint, but also from a historical standpoint.
Absolutely. And I didn't sort of invent this idea of Jewish mobsters fighting proto-Nazis in pre-World War II America. It was a real thing. Maybe not in the place and time where we're talking about. And I've sort of twisted it in such a way as it was never an officially sort of sanctioned operation. But you look at people like, uh, speaking of the establishment of Vegas, somebody like Meyer Lansky, who organized on a large scale Jewish organized crime against the Bund and other sort of uh, other organizations of that ilk, and then also Operation Underworld is another example, which was the uh, American Office of Naval Intelligence needed assistance in detecting German U-boats uh, off the coast of the U.S., and enlisted the help of a bunch of organized crime, including the Jewish Mafia, um, in order to detect those U-boats. And it's like, it's just such a wild idea, but then it also makes so much
Yeah,
sense.
yes, it does. Uh, which it's great too, because in the first issue, obviously, and we won't give too much away, but our two main characters are obviously introduced right away. Howard Berkowitz, which I think you could just tell that his story is going to be so big because you always see like those movies where it's like the meager bookkeeper. You don't expect much from him until it's time for action. But your other character, who might be my new favorite character by far, Ephraim Gold, has to be the best thing about that comic book. That was so much fun to read.
I am just so in love with writing him. It was very hard to let go at the end. Um, he's like in the same way that sort of if you read Nottingham, Marion kind of inhales the scenery in every scene that she's in. Um, Ephraim does the same thing, and I really wanted to sort of uh, portray a Jewish man who was sort of powerful and commanding and in charge, and set that against Howard's sort of like meekness.
Yeah.
Uh, and Howard is by no means like the world's most shrinking violet. Like he's doing in the sort of premise of this, he is challenging you know a mob boss uh, to try to mobilize their resources to protect their community. And that's a pretty impressive feat for somebody who is kind of in that meek nature. But I really think it was really fun to play off Howard's sort of almost nebbishiness against against F's sort of like very active and commanding presence.
Yeah, the first time reading that, all I could think of is, man, he'd be so good in Mad Men. He would fit in so well. Again, strong, well, you just like you see him on the page, and you can immediately tell that he is just like the focal point for that exact moment.
Yeah, and Sammy has done such a great job rendering sort of both characters in such a way as to like really bring out that inner sort of conflict between them in the characterization and in the physicality of the two characters, and the way he draws uh it's like he's like a hop skip and a jump away from James Bond, really, just in terms of the physicality of it.
Definitely. And like I said, it works really well. The other thing that I really like, and I don't know if in your communications you guys had kind of talked about or teamed up with, and I think that really helps your story, and it's a lot bolder, is there's not a lot of bright, flashy colors. Um, I like that's just enough to show me like where to go on the panels and what's connected, but enough that I can read the story and be more engaged in it without getting almost distracted.
Yeah, I mean Ellie Wright is such a fantastic colorist, and uh she's Ringo nominated for a reason. And Yeah, it was my first time working with her, and we worked really hard to try and nail the sort of tone and aesthetic, because color has so much impact on how your brain processes the information that you're seeing. That two different colorists on the same inks can just look like wildly different books with wildly different tones. And so we did a lot of work to try and nail what we were trying to achieve with the colors, and Ellie's done a fantastic job, so I couldn't be happier with that.
Getting a lot more of yourself into this book.
Absolutely. I found it that especially that first issue was really tough. Um, it has a lot of deeply personal aspects, especially when Howard goes ahead and talks about his family, and sort of his journey to migrate to the US and what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, and also the story of his two brothers. It's almost a direct uh, adaptation of what happened to my own great grandfather and his two brothers. And It's a wild story, but it's like it's become embedded almost in family legend. And you see a gravestone on there. We have pictures of that particular great great uncle's gravestone, and it's horrific in that it's got his buried with him something like 6 of his kids who all died before the age of 2. And so we have pictures of that gravestone. We have like, it's just, there's so much of my family history embedded in this in strange places. And yeah, it was both a joy to be able to relate that and translate that, and also like one of the most difficult things I've done as a writer.
Yeah, no, I can imagine kind of putting yourself and your family kind of out there for the world. Especially because comic books, you never know how someone's going to take something. The last thing you want to do is be told like, "Oh, I don't like this. Maybe I don't like this first issue or whatnot," and trying to separate yourself and being like, not to take it personally that maybe that issue wasn't for them, or it's not because of you or your family or your story. Um, I think for anyone that does something personal, you just want everyone to kind of really love the story because you put so much of yourself into it.
I just try to write for me,
Yeah,
and not worry too much. I think to a certain extent, you have to, just in order to enjoy what you're doing. So my guiding principle is always, what would I want to read? Um, what are the things that would make me excited about reading comics? And then you just hope to God that there are enough people that think like you,
yeah,
and that's writing comics.
yeah. And surprisingly, if you do write a comic like that, you go to any convention and you'll find a group of people that do share that same ideals. I mean, that's the beauty of our community is even though if it might be like a small chunk of it, there is that community that is out there for it and that will appreciate it, um,
Yeah.
which is always
I mean,
great to see.
especially with Nottingham, the Nottingham fans are so deeply invested. Um, and it's such a joy for like people to come up and bring, especially at conventions, to bring the books that they've brought in rather than to buy the book there, to
Yeah,
bring what they've brought in and ask me to sign them. I always puts a smile on my face. Especially when they bring in that like first issue, first printing. I'm like, we're at 6 printings of this thing now, but you were there from day one. You were on board, and
you
I
were all
respect
in.
that. Yeah.
Um, and the great thing about this issue too is, like I said, and it's nice with this story arc too because we kind of know where you're going with it due to, history. We kind of see like where it's supposed to lead, or at least the time frame. Um, Now I don't know if you have an ending already in mind for this one, or is this is still kind of you're just kind of taking
Kosher
it piece by
Mafia
piece.
Kosher Mafia is 5 issues in and out. I think if I did more, it'd be sort of anthologized almost, so we'd do it in a different place and time,
Yeah,
um, with a different cast of characters and a different setting, because I want to look at things like, more recent uh, events, like,
yeah,
um, and I want to look at things that are going on or that were going on in Europe rather than just in the US. And the fascinating thing about Jewish organized crime is that obviously, like, the Italians and the Irish and it was everywhere, because obviously, the Jewish diaspora is so widespread, and the migrant experience, especially, during the early 20th century, was really, um, not a pleasant experience, and it isn't a pleasant experience now to a certain extent, but um, it was far worse before, and that's kind of what led people into organized crime, which is why, it's almost uh, always ethnically charged to some extent, um, and I like it's interesting, and I want to explore all of that, and also all of the different parts of my family history while doing that. So, and of course, not to my knowledge, none of my none of my family members were part of the Jewish mob. Um, but using it as a lens to explore some of that is really cool.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, Now obviously with this story, obviously we have this ready to go. And like I was saying before with Nottingham in this story, there's a lot of historical meaning and background to it. After you kind of finished this, did you ever think that you would do, or take a crack of just pure fiction comic book? Just kind of take something
I mean,
kind of gross.
and I will. I got, I did Monomyth at MadCave, which is kind of like a dark fantasy horror story that asks the question, what if Hogwarts was trying to kill you? Like Harry Potter meets Saw. Um, and I had a great time doing that. I also did Death Drop Drag Assassin, which was at Scout Comics, but we're now sort of trying to find a new home for it. And that has been a joy to write, and I really hope we can find another publisher to sort of release the balance of it. So if any editors are listening, hi. Celebrate Pride Month by nabbing a new book, perhaps.
There you go, everyone listening.
Yeah,
Perfect.
no, I enjoy, I enjoy all kinds of fiction, except I don't know, I'm the one genre that I have yet to find the courage to tackle is romance, because I think it's very difficult to write,
Yeah.
very difficult to write well. But then again, I have a horror romance short that's coming out from Boom Studios at some point in the next few months under the Hello Darkness anthology series, which I'm very excited for. And I hope people enjoy, because it is about the horrors of online dating. Um,
Yes, there's so many stories to tell with that. Now, the one thing that's like we were talking before, Ephraim Gold, best character ever. If you had to take him and drop him in either to another book that you did or another comic book that you'd like to see him team up with someone, off the top of your head, do you have something you would like to see?
oof, oof.
Because him and the Punisher for me was, I would love to watch them work.
um, oh, that's a hard one.
Yeah,
So many good characters. I think I would love to see him in some respects as a foil for Superman. I think that would be a weird full circle moment. Because you know, this is a character that was inspired by the birth of Superman. So, and I think they would be so at odds with each other that it would be fun to see where that goes.
yeah, that'd be good. Especially since from this issue, I mean, we can obviously see that he might be an organized crime, but he does have, he's not without a heart. I mean, he does have
Yeah,
the
I mean,
interest of people.
he actually is a person who kind of almost has his heart on his sleeve.
Yeah,
He's not afraid to sort of be led by his emotions, which I think is also, a powerful statement, especially for, men of a certain age. Like, I think that is really, something that often we don't see, is somebody who is both sort of very, he has a very masculine presence in a sense, but he is also not afraid to be led by sentimentality and emotion, as much as he sort of tries to claim that he isn't. He really is.
definitely. Now, with everything said and done, the last question before we kind of get some details about this, where do you see the next steps after everything's released for this, and maybe in the next 1 or 2 years? Where would you like to see kind of your career go and what you're working on next?
I want to do more licensed work. So again, editors, if you've got if you've got licensed work that you think I'd be a good fit for, let me know.
Hit our friend up here.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm so put me in, coach. Yeah, I think hopefully more licensed work and just more creator and stuff from me. I'm just willing to, I just want to make more comics and have more fun doing it. It's really the best job in the world. So I don't have a specific direction apart from that. Uh, and we'll see what the post San Diego Comic-Con world brings, because that's my next stop. And I look forward to seeing anybody there who we have a signing lined up for Nottingham. So bring your Nottingham books, and I'll scribble on them, and we'll have a chat, and we'll have a good time.
Perfect. All right. So for everyone interested listening, we have Kosher Mafia #1. Final order cutoff we have coming in at July 8th for a release of August 7th. After that August 7th release, then I'm assuming every issue after that will be 1 month
Monthly.
after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Perfect.
it's 5 issues. They'll come out monthly, and then it'll be a couple of months break, and the trade will drop.
Awesome. Very nice. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show and talking about your book. We're very excited to have it come out. Anyone interested in kind of watching your work, seeing what you're doing, keeping up to date with you, where are the best places to find you?
Best places to find me: Twitter and Instagram at David T. Hazan, or my website, davidhazan.com. I'm also on Blue Sky at or davidhazan.bluesky.social, but I don't know how that works. And I'm trying to post more on there, but bear with me, because the more social media platforms I get, the less interested I am in social media.
That is fair. And they do not make it easy to link any of the posts together at all. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking to us about Kosher Mafia. Everyone listening, again, final order cutoff July 8th, and we will have a release date August 7th. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and this will be up on YouTube if you are watching, along with our other videos. Hit subscribe and like, and again, follow David for more of his work, and we'll keep you updated as this series unfolds. Everyone, have a good night.